The first thing that I've realized is that maybe K-pop stans promote everyone and their mothers as Nugu underrated regardless of if the group is Nugu underrated, is not because they don't care. I've said it before that K-pop stans promote a group as Nugu underrated because they don't care, but I think that maybe it could also apart from not caring be this reason that since K-pop stans, a lot of who I've seen especially on KTube, make videos on Nugu groups or underrated groups, most of what you see on their videos are groups from companies with good budgets where their MVs each time are pretty high quality. So, since most of the groups that are promoted as Nugu underrated are groups that can make good MVs, promote live a good amount and have pretty good views for their MVs, sometimes reaching 15 million or more and even having good amount of subs too, with a rare few K-tubers actually promoting Nugu underrated groups alongside these groups. I feel like if K-pop stans were to leave these groups out to actually promote groups that are Nugu underrated and actually need the promotions, then they wouldn't have enough groups to make a video idea based on the idea of Nugu or underrated. Because most K-pop stans who know Nugu underrated groups mostly know the top of the iceberg groups where not all of them are Nugu underrated and not a lot of K-pop stans know the actual bottom of the barrel Nugu underrated groups. And so, they'd have to scrap the idea entirely by not having enough artists to actually make the idea properly, even though enough artists exists to make a video of 100 Nugu underrated groups, one for boy groups and one for girl groups each, with each number having a different group and no repetition, and also having groups left over, showing just how many groups exist in the industry that debut. That's why I say this. I'm not saying this is fact though, but just something I've observed as a Nugu expert myself who loves seeing videos on Nugu underrated groups only to get disappointed when the video doesn't live up to the title because K-tubers do not know what Nugu underrated groups actually are. The next thing that I've realized is that there are some Korean artists who might not show themselves as popular due to the views of their music, their subscriber counts on YouTube or social media presence, and even if K-pop stans might not know them much, these artists might indeed actually be popular but only in Korea and not globally. Looking at K-pop stans, there are not a lot of K-pop stans venturing out of just listening to mainstream K-pop groups and soloists, and maybe bands sometimes, and also listening to other genre artists within Korean music, and so these K-pop stans asked about these artists may not know of these artists' existence. Also, Korea has their own music platforms, and they also have their own music charts and such. And so is seeing these artists on Spotify, Apple and other global platforms for music streaming used. We might see them as Nugu, underrated and needing of more fans, when in actuality they're not Nugu at all and you'd have to be in Korea or be in use of Korean-made platforms to know that these artists are actually quite huge and that just because you or I wouldn't know of them, doesn't mean others won't, because Koreans would defo know them really well if their music is played a lot everywhere in Korea. So, in this instance if K-pop stans were to promote these artists as Nugu underrated, I wouldn't blame them because again, these artists are huge in Korea and not globally, so they dominate Korea charts and are played a lot in Korea, so it may not be easy to know besides looking them up in Korean. The next thing that I've realized is that K-pop stans, not directed towards the ones who have valid takes and something to say, will have multiple examples ready when it's time to say K-pop is mid, songs are shorter or something about K-pop to complain about, but I don't think they're discussion ready to properly discuss things if someone debunks them by showing them songs that go completely opposite to what the K-pop stan originally said. I feel like since there are a lot of K-pop stans who have channels that are just here to be rant hot takes style saying the most top of the level repeated takes for views and agreements or following what others say and not really having their own thoughts, someone debunking the K-tuber in the comments might just lead the K-tuber to respond rudely and think what you're saying is an attack and won't really respond in a way that leads to a friendly discussion. These channels are just there to say what they say and then get simple comments that are, I agree, or, I agree especially with the first one, and comments like these that don't go in depth, and so I don't think any channel in general like these would work debate style. They're not here actually critique K-pop. They're here to give short punchy takes that say nothing. The next thing that I've realized is that similar to the first point about K-pop stans mostly knowing bigger budgeted less popular groups that they call Nugu underrated. If many K-tubers be knowing mainly these top of the iceberg groups and then make videos about underrated groups you need to stan, or groups that need more attention, or videos like these delving into Nugu underrated territory adding these groups And since K-pop stans making these videos know a limited handful of less popular groups and very rarely know extremely bottom of the barrel actual nugu underrated groups, and with every K-tuber making these types of videos with each K-tuber possibly having different opinions, who truly deserves it? What I mean to say is that, say there are a lot of K-tubers who know less popular groups for example, but these K-tubers only know about 30 big budgeted less popular groups, and if a lot of K-tubers make videos related to these less popular groups needing attention and every K-tuber be sharing their own opinions and each video having different groups from the 30 groups, who out of the 30 groups actually deserve to get more attention? Because not every one of these 30 groups are gonna be musically good for all of them to deserve it, and 30 is far too a small number of groups for these videos to even be properly made. I don't understand this, but it made me realize how these types of content cannot be accurate if K-tubers don't know a lot of less popular or nugu underrated groups in general for this to be made in a proper way. Because as I said in the first one about K-tubers promoting groups that are not even nugu underrated as nugu underrated. Because they got more noticed, making these videos adding these groups alongside actual nugu underrated groups, again did they even deserve it considering these groups are more on the path of getting popular, and yet you mix them in with groups who actually need more attention because they're not that known and the title may just be lies mixed in with probably more noticed groups than actual groups that need attention. The next thing that I've realized is that a lot of the groups K-tubers promote as nugu underrated have a good budget, as I've said in this video a lot, so they'd technically be more closer to getting noticed over actual underrated nugu groups because of their good budget, so where's them actually being nugu underrated when if their company put effort into the groups since the company 100% has the budget to do so, these groups could get better noticeability. So, I don't understand people in calling these groups nugu underrated when that it would maybe easier for them to get out of nugudom and grow more rather than stay there and not even get a small bit of noticeability. Because these groups don't seem to be really losing their budget with each comeback and seem to be making pretty good budgeted music videos, so calling them nugu underrated isn't really correct especially when these groups debut coming out of nowhere getting 1M plus views only going higher for their MVs each comeback pretty easily while also having 100 plus thousand subscribers pretty easily too. With actual nugu underrated groups, they debut and could get max 100k plus views and maybe go up and the highest point they could reach is 500k plus views, and the actual nugas who do reach 1M plus views are probably due to some reasons that helped them or they've reached 1M plus views but after some time for the song. So yeah, despite these bigger budgeted groups not being popular completely yet, they're not nugu underrated just because you say so, because that would take away from their hard work and y'all would be giving promotions to a group as if they're some I have zero fans group, support me, when their sales would show otherwise. And you just don't wanna care enough to do a bit of research on the group to know about their sales and such to see what the real truth is. It's only a matter of time before Blackpink release a song and gets the good Blackpink views but less in comparison to their other music, and people start calling them nugu. The next thing that I've realized is continuing point 5, that a lot of the groups that K-tubers promote as nugu underrated have a good enough budget where their company putting effort into them would leave them easily enough to get noticed, so K-tubers are legit. Any K-pop stan trying to look for lesser known groups would easily find them if they did a bit of research because these groups are the top of the barrel when it comes to lesser known groups. So, I don't understand when people promote these groups as nugu underrated when if these groups are easily searchable and are not hard to find, then that would make them more closer to known than unknown. You can find many nugu underrated K-pop group videos where the same groups are included, so how exactly does it make them nugu underrated when K-pop stans promote them more over actual nugu underrated groups? Like, you're more likely to find someone like Purple Kiss, Billy, Cherry Bullet, Weekly, for example, in a nugu underrated girl groups video than you are to find #ICU, Floria, Asomd, for example, who are actual nugu underrated girl groups. So, tell me what makes these groups nugu underrated exactly since many K-tubers know they exist and their sales, MV views, subs and other things may be good enough for them to be more on the known side, which again takes away from the whole idea of the video being inaccurate. The last thing that I've realized is that there's no point in K-pop groups doing a Japanese debut for example or any outside Korea group doing a K-pop debut if the song is less of the language of the market you're debuting in. What I mean to say is that, if an outside Korea, maybe a Japanese group, does a K-pop debut, there would be no point in the K-pop debut if the song lacks in the Korean lyrics and may have more English or another language in it. It's why when New Jeans did their Japanese debut, the song Supernatural, which is the title track, had English leading in first place, Korean leading in second place and Japanese in last place. Like, how does a Japanese debut have less Japanese compared to the other languages, and why is there Korean in a Japanese debut to begin with? It just makes no sense to debut in another market for those people who speak a completely different language but not have that language prominent in your songs. If a song is meant to be, for example, a Japanese debut but has more English than Japanese and the Japanese is really less in the lyrics, then what's stopping it from being an international release, since even when targeting the Japanese market the song still reads like an international release with Japanese slight add-ons. I know a lot of you K-pop stans don't care about things like these, but I do, because what's the point of different languages existing in the world if the artist barely sings in that language for the market they target? If groups are not singing more in the language of the market they target, even with English or another language being there but less, then we should just remove every language in the world and make one unified language for the world to speak, because people don't care really to have to properly make their music, and neither do fans care to say something, because there are fans who don't see languages and they'll call English Western, international songs K-pop, so IDK. I feel like I'm one of the only few K-pop stans who care about the music only becomes that country's music if it's in the country's language.